What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Alec Murdaugh video. Day 4, the state starts proving its case. They start putting on evidence, letting us know what it is they have, and can they prove that Alex Murdaugh did what they say he did. Thank you for joining me tonight. You could be anywhere in the world and you're here. And as you can tell, we've got a little bit of a different angle, a different spot. We're trying some different things, experimenting with the home studio. So if you like it, let me know. Hit that thumbs up button, hit the like button on the video, whether you like the new setup or not. But I always want to know if you guys like the different things we're doing. We're trying different lighting, different angles. Some people gave some critique, stuff they like, stuff they didn't like about the last one. So we're doing the best that we can. And we're trying to see the right spot that gives the best and the most pleasurable view for you, based on the different spots we can do it and the different lighting. So always let me know. And if you don't like it, that's okay. That's okay. I think you'll still watch. This isn't a Steven Spielberg production. I think you're here more for the content than the looks, but we will continue to try to bring you the best sound and look and the crispiest look that we possibly can. A lot of people like the shirt. We had dinner with some friends tonight, so I'm coming straight off of that. That's why we had to push it back to 8:45. Yes, one of my fave shirts. I'm a Biggie Smalls guy. I'm also a Tupac guy. I didn't pick sides there. I'm a big fan of, is it old school hip hop? Does that make me seem young? Does that make me seem old? I love me some diss tracks and some battle raps and things like that. So I'm glad you're here. We're going to get into it today. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to our page if you haven't already. We've been doing a lot of videos throughout the week that I did not expect us to do. I thought we were just going to be doing these lives every night, and we are going to continue to do the lives every night around 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. I see we've got a bunch of new members here. Crazy for True Crime, Ella B, Carrie Stolley, and more that we will get to as we continue going through the video. What we're going to do, and this is kind of more common to what the structure of the video is going to be, where I'm going to give a recap, a brief overview of who was called, what they talked about today, what type of evidence they tried to pull out. We'll talk about cross-examination. I'll talk about what I thought the state was trying to prove, or the prosecutor was trying to prove, and what holes the defense was trying to poke and where they're kind of going. You guys will let me know, of course, if you thought it was effective or ineffective. They did a good job, a bad job, whatever it may be. I want to hear from you as potential jurors, what you thought of the presentation. So I'll do a quick recap. It's not going to be hours and hours and hours, but I am going to play a few clips from the trial that I thought illustrate certain points or were some highlights of the day. And I think I have 2 or 3 I'm going to play from today, especially the ending. Yeah, where was, dang, this just the chat's flying. There was some fire at the end of the day today. Yes, EJ, we are going to be playing the end of the day today because it was probably the most interesting part of the day. And we're seeing some of the theories develop and build. You don't always know when just one witness takes a stand, or even after some of the testimony is done. You don't necessarily see the full picture of what they are trying to prove or what angle the defense is taking with the case. But we really learned it as the witnesses continued. So thank you, EJ, for that comment. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, let's get those likes up to 2,000. Let's get it out of the way. All right, here we go. So the first part I want to do, and John is not in here yet, so hold on. All right, so the first officer, Officer Green, I believe is his name. I'm not going to get everybody's name right, okay, because they're going to call a lot of witnesses, and I'm kind of listening while I'm working and stuff, but the first officer was the first one to report to the scene, which is always important. He secured the scene. He made sure no evidence was tampered with. He talked to Murdaugh. He was the first one to see him. He secured the weapon. He confirmed that this was Alec Murdaugh. and he confirmed that what he said was correct or incorrect. And I think that that is all really important to get out. They're going chronologically. We're getting a lot of the first responders. We're getting a lot of the stuff that happened at the beginning of this case, at the beginning of this night, and we're getting a full timeline. We're going to start to get a full picture. The questions that we have and the holes that are in this story are going to be highlighted by the defense. That's clear from the jump. So Mr. Green, he came here, Officer Green, responded to the scene, taped it off, saw some footprints, some track marks, saw Alec Murdaugh, was able to explain how he was acting like he was upset, but he wasn't crying. He was very sure he was crying, or he wasn't crying. Some other ones, not necessarily. They didn't know if he was crying or not know if he was crying. And some of them, to me, I think were very kind to Alec Murdaugh, how they explained what was going on. And they just continued to kind of go through the case one step at a time, explaining to us what happened. Nanny thought the officers were great, and they did not get off topic and were intimidating. There are definitely intimidation tactics that this defense attorney is pulling throughout the trial. Some of them get called out, some of them don't. He says thank you every time he wins objections, which more on that later. He stands up while he makes objections while the other lawyer is questioning the witnesses. He gets loud when he gets objected to and tries to talk over the lawyer and ask the question even over an objection. And I told you this, guys, a long time ago in another trial, if you remember, really great defense attorneys and ones that are really experienced, and basically a lot of judges and prosecutors used to work for them, is my experience. When they come in there, they try to tell the judge what to do, tell the judge what the law is. They're not making an argument. They're stating the way that they're doing it is correct. Doesn't mean they always win the arguments, but sometimes they win some that they shouldn't, which is always interesting. So he finds a shotgun. It wasn't the murder weapon. That was the important part. A lot of the stuff they talked about gunshot residue, but it was only consistent with Alec Murdaugh going to grab the shotgun. He saw the shotgun, but it wasn't the shotgun that was used in the case. They saw water that looked like it was to wash out the kennels, but they don't really know where that water came from, but it didn't come from the rain. So there was a lot of things like that were happening. And I thought was not super effective proof that he committed a crime, but that's okay. Because in the beginning of cases, the first few witnesses that you call a lot of times will be laying the foundation for what you're trying to prove in the case. You don't have to prove the case with the first witness. Every witness does not have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the totality of the evidence that proves the case. And that is what the prosecution is trying to do. So don't make up your mind right in the beginning. Now, listen, in my opinion, based off today, Alec Murdaugh is still absolutely not guilty. He is still presumed innocent, and I don't think they've overcome their burden just today. If you disagree with me, let me know in the chat. If you think they already proved their case, let me know. Okay, so yeah, there was talk about water. There's talk about track marks. Murdaugh mentions the boat case with his son Paul and how this might have been connected to that. There was some more discussion about that later. One thing I thought was really interesting based on a lot of your questions last night, which was, are we sure that Alec Murdaugh was the one that did this? Are we sure it could not have been Paul who killed the mom and then killed himself? And a lot of you had these different theories that potentially could have happened. And in reality, they thought the same thing. This was something that came across law enforcement's minds. They even ruled out the possibility that Paul shot Maggie first and then shot himself. So that was a theory that was potentially investigated. I did not hear why necessarily they ruled it out or how they ruled it out, but he did say they were trying to rule out that it was Paul first and then Maggie. They thought the shotgun might be under Paul because he was face first and his hands were kind of underneath him. Yes, Ella B, we are going to get to that. And it's hard not to just kind of go into all the theories at once. So I try to keep it linear with what happened today. I'm not doing a very good job because I'm kind of going all over the place. So let's try to keep it a little bit more linear. Yeah, Katie, exactly. So Cross. So on Cross, he starts out by saying, I called you multiple times, left you messages. Why didn't you answer? Why didn't you ever call me back? And I thought it was, pretty good. Some lawyers do that. I see that happening all the time. But I actually thought the law enforcement officer's answer was great. The law enforcement officer's like, maybe you have the wrong number. It almost reminded me of like Danny Zuko in Greece. Like, I don't know. Maybe there's two of us. It's like he's like, I don't know. Maybe you had the wrong number. Did you call my cell phone? So the officer was acting like he was not dodging the questions. Dodging the calls. And they don't have to necessarily talk to Harpootlian. It seems like I don't know what the discovery rules are in South Carolina, but it doesn't seem like he was answering his calls. And he said, but you've talked to Mr. Waters multiple times. He's like, yes, I have. I've talked to him at least 3 to 4 times. Again, I felt like a lot of these officers were just really honest. I didn't feel like a single one of them was reaching. I didn't feel like a single one of them was, on a high horse or on a witch hunt or out to get Murdaugh at all. All right. So we did confirm, and this is important. This is why opening statements are important, to confirm which lawyer's being honest, which one's trying to sell us some snake oil, right? And one of the things Murdaugh's lawyer said is he put a 12 gauge and a 16 gauge shell. If I use incorrect ammo or weapon verbiage, I apologize. You guys know that this is not my forte, but he did put the wrong size shell in the shotgun. And he asked what would happen. And he said, well, I don't know. I've never done it, but I don't think it would be a good idea. And he said, the person shooting the gun could get really hurt, right? Yes. So that's confirmed. That he wasn't thinking straight. He put the wrong ammo into the shotgun. Confirmed by the law enforcement officer. Actually, how does he know who put the ammo in there? But there was a 16 gauge and a 12 gauge shotgun. So then, when they start talking about the crime scene, and this was a common theme by the defense in every cross-examination of every law enforcement officer witness so far today, is the crime scene. This was similar to, if you remember, the Curtis Reeves trial. That this was not a good investigation. This was not a thorough investigation. That is going to be a theme throughout this case. You didn't take pictures of the tire tracks, did you? Do you wish you would have? Questions like that are absolutely appropriate. It's not speculative because you're asking them specifically, do you wish you would have? And here was one of the, I thought, big time moves that we can learn from here. Let me pull this up. So let's play this clip. So if you remember, when he was cross-examining this law enforcement officer, and during direct, they played a lot of his body cam footage, right? And when he was cross-examining him, there was some discussion about, did Alex tell you about Paul's boat case? Or, how did that come out? And listen to what Harpootlian does. Look at this kind of legal maneuvering that Dick Harpootlian does here. And, love him or hate him, a lot of you guys don't like him. I'm just going to show you some tidbits of certain kind of lawyering here. So let's listen in together.
Your Honor, I'd object. They're putting a transcript that's not been. No, we're going to play the video. It's up on the screen.
So just to set the stage for this argument, and this happens in tons of cases where lawyers will have a video like this transcribed by a court reporter, somebody that works for them, whatever it may be. It's not an official transcript. And they fight about whether they want to put the words on the screen because is that what was really said, especially when there's certain things that are hard to hear. Sometimes they create a transcript just to help them. My dad does this all the time. Sometimes he puts a recorder that, goes off to somebody else to type that's recording down the words that are saying. So they had some discussion and the prosecutor's like, no, I object. You're not putting a transcript up. And Harpootlian's like, listen, we're going to play the video. We just have a transcript made at the same time that we also want to read. And the prosecutor doesn't want him to read it because the prosecutor is trying to say, we don't know if that transcript is accurate. Harpootlian is saying, we have a transcript that's exactly like the video. And listen to how he gets it done here. Just an interesting lawyering tip here.
It's up on the screen, Your Honor. I object.
I apologize.
Can you take it down, please? Thank you.
We have to prepare the transcript. It's synced with the video.
We have prepared a transcript that's in sync with the video. And he says this in front of the jury. He tells the jury that they have prepared a transcript synced with the video. That's a statement of fact there.
Well, I object to that. Your Honor, I object. This transcript's not been provided. There's no need for a transcript. The officer is here. They can play the video and he can comment on it.
The transcript being offered.
Using the direct audio visual to
Well, you have questions for the witness, questions for your IT guy. You're just reading, ready to proceed. I understand. We're waiting for you.
This is a guy that does not get phased. You cannot shake Harpootlian. He's like, a lot going on, Judge. Some lawyers would freak out. I mean, we saw other cases. We've seen lawyers freak out. We've seen lawyers not know how to ask questions, things like that. He does not freak out.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm ready. What was the time? 17.
It's page 17. Line, start at 5 feet. No, I don't have that clock. It's just synced with the thing. It's not. Can you find that? No time.
All right, come on.
To the chase is taking too much time.
All right, here we go. He's going to cut to the chase, okay? And how's he going to cut to the chase? How's he going to get out there and ask these questions and basically either impeach this witness or refresh this witness's recollection with a transcript that has not been offered, that has been objected to, that the judge has not allowed in? Guess what? Harpootlian's walking up to ask a question while holding the transcript and very clearly reading from the transcript with his glasses on in front of the jury. And the officer just goes with it and answers honestly.
On this transcript, on this tape, fire rescue person says to you, I believe you agreed with me, set of prints behind the trailer. You were told
Jackie's publishing again this
I'm
transcript.
not publishing, I'm asking.
Ooh, see, here's where they go. He was absolutely publishing. He was reading the transcript to the jury. Great objection there. And then he gets loud. I told you, lawyers like this, they tell you what the right thing to do is. They tell you what they're doing. They don't even wait for the judge to rule. They try to take over the courtroom.
Did you?
I object.
I haven't heard a question yet.
And I love this prosecutor is not going to back down. This is a good battle. That's what I'm telling you. This is a good battle. Some of the testimony was a little boring or repetitive today, but it was a good battle between the lawyers.
Like to make one. Were you told by fire and rescue there's a set of prints behind the trailer?
Yes.
Okay.
And now it's hard if you're sitting on the stand as the law enforcement officer and you know he's reading from a transcript. It's a lot harder for you to say, I don't remember, or I'm not sure, or no, they didn't, because you think he's reading from a transcript from your body cam that night. So you're going to believe what he's saying is true, and you don't want to get embarrassed on the stand. It's very effective and strong to do it this way. And the prosecutor's right. I think the prosecutors say, Judge, he can't read off the transcript to impeach him. If he wants to play the video and then ask him something to refresh his recollection, that's fine.
And did he tell you that they attempted to not disturb those footprints in any way?
I don't recall exactly what was said.
Let me further ask you. You asked Mr. Murdaugh, we heard this on the tape, you talked about the tire tracks coming and going, and he told you those weren't his tire tracks, correct?
He did say that they were not.
Okay.
And this was a big theme all day. The multiple sets of tire tracks, they didn't necessarily preserve. They didn't necessarily test. They couldn't figure out where they came from. It wasn't Murdaugh's truck. It wasn't the farm truck. It wasn't Paul's truck. So whose truck was it? The defense is going to come up with an argument. You better believe. Right now they're poking holes. They're just taking shots here, but they're going to say there was an extra set of tire marks. There was 2 separate guns, neither of which were there because the tire marks were from the car, from the person that took the guns and left, and that person was not Alex Murdaugh. That's where it's going. That's what they're building. So we've got to keep track of what are they trying to build? Why are they poking their holes? Are they arguing just to argue? Do these holes even matter?
Okay. And further, he indicated to you, Mr. Murdaugh did, that he felt this was related to the boat case. You indicated you knew about the boat case. You read about the boat case. Paul had been charged with 3 counts of felony DUI, killing a young girl and wounding 2 others, correct?
I don't know much details about that case. I really don't.
Okay. But Mr. Murdaugh indicated to you that the threats made against Paul.
He did.
And that he even got in a fight once about it.
I believe he said punched.
Punched, okay. And so on the scene, he believed that Paul's death was connected to someone angry about the boat case, correct?
Back to that, Your Honor, as to what he believed, asking the witness what another person believed.
Objection's overruled.
Thank you. On the
Thank you. Listen to how many times he says thank you when he wins objections. And we've talked about it before. It's improper, and eventually we get there, but he does it all the time.
scene, Mr. Murdaugh indicated to you he thought the death of his son was related to his son's involvement in the death of a young lady and the injury of 2 others in the boat case, correct?
It appeared that that's what he was getting at, yes.
All right. So we'll get back to more of the video in a little bit. But yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Very good lawyering there. And we're going to see more of it later. You'll also notice when he's questioning witnesses, because he was a prosecutor for a long time, a good prosecutor, the top prosecutor, like we said. He's been a defense attorney for a long time. And I've been in these situations. I've seen lawyers in these situations. I've studied these rules. When a lawyer goes and studies the rules and the procedure and the way they're supposed to set up crime scenes and contain crime scenes and keep evidence and protect it in the chain of custody, they absolutely know it better than law enforcement. And it's even worse than that, because you ever learn something, you learn how to do something, and there's the way you do it by the book, and then there's the way it's really done. Well, I always tell my clients, we talk about if they set up an employee manual, I'm like, if you put it in writing and you set up that employee manual, you better stick by it. Because once those rules exist in writing, that's the standard, regardless of what you actually do. And it's the same thing for law enforcement officers. If there's a book on how to do it, but you do it the actual way it happens in actuality, well, guess what? When you come to trial, the lawyers are going to stick to that book and they are going to blow it wide open and ask you why you don't stick to the book. You do it your own way. That's not the way you're taught. That's not the way the book says. And juries usually understand that. And he did that a lot. He really stuck to and knew the procedures. He knew it enough that he was asking these questions so that the witnesses knew. He knew, they knew he knew. So that then if he stretched a little and pushed a little, they would be like, oh crap, this guy knows his stuff. I don't know if I want to argue with him. I felt that today when he was discussing a lot of these procedures with the witnesses. Then the redirect I thought was great, except for the fact that it was all leading questions. He didn't object to any of them during this witness. Later on, when he starts leading witnesses through all the redirects, Harpootlian starts objecting. But I mean, he just went down there and he's like, you know how to do this, right? You've done this on a million cases, right? You want to preserve the evidence, right? You did preserve the evidence, right? You preserved everything that was important, right? And that's how you figured it out and you put the crime scene together and there were no issues, right? You did it by the book, right? And it was all leading questions. But I thought it was a good redirect. I thought that it really kind of helped it. Then they allowed a recross. So we're going to get some recrosses here, right? Direct exam, cross exam, redirect, and then recross. The judge is going to let these lawyers argue. And again, if you don't think it has anything to do with the quality and respect for these lawyers in the courtroom, you're not noticing the difference in this trial and some of the other trials that we've seen. And I want to point that out to you. I want to make sure you guys understand that. All right, let's answer a few questions here so we don't get too far behind on that. Jesse Sue, so glad to finally catch you live. I'm so glad I found your page. I'm buying this super chat just to hear you say my name, Jesse Sue. You're awesome, Peter. Thanks. Suzanne Murdaugh, rodeo. His son's on the witness list. Why is he in court? A lot of people have asked that. I don't know if the rule of sequestration has been invoked. If it has, sometimes they do make exceptions for family members or family members of the victims. Sometimes the parties can agree to allow them to stay in the room, and maybe Murdaugh's side allowed him to stay in the room. I'm not positive. I haven't heard an explanation as to why. Tammy, love the time, love the blue, love the new setup. Thank you, Tammy. I appreciate that. Sarah, hey, Peter, what is up with the email to the judge? Why did the lawyers act like it wasn't a big deal? The email to the judge. I don't know. You're going to have to give me more context in that. I'm not sure what the email to the judge was. Sorry about that, Sarah. Ashley, defense won the day, which surprised me. Thoughts? Maybe if John's able to, we can ask who won the day, defense or prosecution, in a poll. Jenny X, is defense as disorganized as he appears, or is his bumbling on purpose? If on purpose, why? I think it is on purpose. I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think there's some tech issues. There is a lot going on, like you said. There's transcripts, there's audio, there's video, there's certain pictures that can't be shown to the audience. So there is a lot going on. But I think part of the ho-hum, sorry about that, I'm not publishing this transcript, I'm just reading it to the jury, just so you know. Reading something to the jury is publishing it to the jury. So there is a little bit of gamesmanship to it. And so the jury doesn't think he's a total shark. But then other times he lays the law down. So it's kind of like a little bit of a balance there. I mean, I have talked to lots of lawyers, I won't mention any by name specifically, that I know do this on purpose. Nicholas, in between breaks, the defense made some decent arguments towards reasonable doubt. It is a circumstantial case, too many holes, and this case crumbles. I'm with you so far, Nicholas. I'm absolutely with you so far. Lita, just want to explain why I was appalled that the defense said he was honored to represent AM. AM is a disgrace to the profession for stealing money from clients. Alex Sahar, did they find the murder weapon? No. Also, I saw the defense asking more questions after redirect, unlike JD v. Amber Heard. Is that unusual? It depends on the judge. I've had cases where we're allowed to recross. I've had other cases where we're not allowed to recross. I always want to be able to recross. Let's go. Now, your recross should be limited to what was on redirect. Your redirect should be limited to what's on cross. Your cross is pretty limited to what's on direct. So each time it should get more limited, so it shouldn't go on forever. But I like one recross. I'm a fan of that. John, I will say you were hyping this case up, and I kind of doubted you. It started with fireworks. I was wrong, LOL. I will say the defense has been impressive. I could tell from the jump this defense was going to be good. The prosecutor's very good too. Don't sleep on the prosecutor. He's very good too. Sarah Sutton, how did Maggie and Paul get to the kennels? We don't know that answer, and that's really interesting. And it seems like Murdaugh didn't know that answer. But one of the questions that the defense lawyers asked, and this is why you got to listen to these questions, they are creating potential stories. They said, well, there was that farm truck, whatever that is. I don't know. I don't own a farm. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I guess there's a truck you can have that's just licensed to the farm or something that I would guess it doesn't go off the farm. It's like a work truck that's just on the farm. Maybe you don't have to pay for the same insurance or something on it. But they said, well, maybe they drove that there. And law enforcement officers like, we don't know how they got there. Phyllis Wall, did he change clothes when he went home to get the gun? Did he load the gun incorrectly to blow up on himself and back out? Now, listen, if I didn't know anything else about Alec Murdaugh, I think this doesn't make any sense, but knowing some other stories, that could be possible. I am going to save the answer to your first question about changing clothes because we talk a lot more about that later. Lisa, isn't Harpootlian also a current South Carolina senator or representative? I thought he was kind of politician, but I didn't think he was a senator. I know he's a big shot over there. We went through his credentials together. Just one. The judge does not like idle time. Keep it moving. And he'll take breaks. He'll take comfort breaks, stand up and stretch. I love the judge, man. I think he's funny. He's got a good sense of humor. This is the kind of judge that it's actually more lighthearted and not so crazy stressful to try a case in front of as a lawyer and as a jury. Obviously, as a criminal defendant, every case is stressful. Mandy Bishop, if these lawyers are some of the best, why do they seem so unprepared, so much downtime and paper shuffling? I will say they demanded speedy trial. This is way faster than most murder trials like this would go. So they're getting information. I mean, if you listen to some of the motion hearings, they were filing hearings at night. They were filing hearings at 8 o'clock in the morning before they got to court. So stuff is still happening. Stuff is still coming in. They're not the youngest guys either. Okay. So, give them some time, especially with technology. Jeannie Nash, thank you so much. Jai Scott. CMC, knowing AM is a lawyer and the crime scene is a hot mess, what do you think of all the things AM said on the 911 call and to the first cop on the scene? CMC, I will let this transition us into a few more witnesses, including the 911 tape, which we will get to in a minute. And I will let you know my thoughts on it when we get there. Another person about the email the judge had this morning, Deidre. Somebody let me know what that email is about. What is the email? I must have missed it. Them talking about the email this morning. Okay. Next witness was Detective McDowell. Again, making sure. So the prosecutor learned from the first witness, and this is how you see they're going to learn as the trial goes on. He learned from the first witness what holes Harpootlian's going to try to poke. He tried to shore some of those up with this witness, talk about how the evidence wasn't disturbed, talk about how Murdaugh was kind of weird. One of the things that was weird that I thought they made too big of a deal of on the body cam is Murdaugh's explaining, this is my son's birthday. Somebody walks by who we find out is one of the officers that comes up later and says, "How you doing?" They kept asking, like, he stopped saying that to say, "Hey, how you doing?" I mean, I don't know what I would be like in this situation. God, please help me that this never happens to me, that I'm in a situation where I find this at my house. But if somebody walks by and you say, "Hey, how you doing?" especially a law enforcement officer or military or whatever, I find myself doing that all the time. Now, maybe under these circumstances, you would think he wouldn't be talking to anybody, but I thought they made a really big deal about that didn't seem like that big of a deal to me as a lawyer, but to you as a layperson, let me know if you disagree with me in the comments. Are you familiar with this family this law enforcement officer asked you could hear on his body cam? And most people said no, but I was wondering, did he know who the family was? Because he asked that question. Cross-examination, they asked about who his supervisor was. He talked about how they didn't apprehend anyone, and we heard them talk later about, but everybody said, everybody's safe, nothing to worry about. Well, if that was true, how is that possible if you didn't apprehend anybody? AM was visibly upset, and he didn't observe any blood. Later at the end of the video, I'm going to talk about stuff that we for sure learned today that was hammered home with every witness. We'll talk about that at the end, what the state actually proved and what was in common and consistent throughout all the witnesses today. All right. Then we heard from Ms. Bison Smith and Ms. Stallings, who were the 911. Basically, they introduced the 911 tapes. So let's listen to that now. And I'm just going to play the first one so we can kind of hear his, hear how he was acting when he called on 911. And I really want you guys to let me know in the chat. Do you think that he was acting appropriately, inappropriately? How would you expect somebody to act in this situation? Did you think he was faking, or what are your thoughts? And then I'll tell you mine after we listen to it.
My wife and child just stuck there. Okay, you said 4147 Murdaugh Road in Allison? Sir? You said 4147 Moselle Road in Allison? Yes, sir. 4147 Moselle Road. Stay on the line with me, okay? Yes, sir. Stay on the line with me, okay? Hello? I'm still here. Stay on the line. I'm still here, okay? Collison, I have an Alex Murdaugh on the line, caller from 4147 Moselle Road. He's advising that his wife and child was shot. Mr. Murdaugh, go ahead and talk to Collison. It's 4147 Moselle Road. I'll get up to it now. It's fast. How did they shoot? Did they shoot themselves? Oh, no. Hell no. Okay, and are they breathing? No, ma'am. Okay, and you said it's your wife and your son? My wife and my son. Are they in a vehicle? No, ma'am, they're on the ground out at my kennel. I can tell that he's shot in the head, and he's shot really bad. He's got really bad.
The state has
Okay. So that was the 911 call. I think that gets our point across. A lot of you said you felt like he was faking it. A lot of you felt like it was not sincere. A lot of you were not connecting to it, but some of you were. Some of you thought it was legitimate. Some of you thought that, it was showing emotion. I will say, based on all of the testimony, I feel like he was emotional when they showed up and acting consistently with how someone should act in this situation, or that they would expect somebody to act. They did all pretty much say that. All right, the fire chief. I've got so many firefighter friends. I like see my friends in this guy 25 years from now. They both had injuries that were not sustainable. That's also something that was very consistent. Now, when they showed up, pretty much nobody would think that you could do CPR, or you wouldn't really need to check a pulse, as sad as that sounds. Harpootlian, though, asked a couple witnesses, like, well, you've seen a lot of dead bodies, right? The fire chief, I thought was interesting, did know Murdaugh professionally, had done depots with his law firm, which I thought Harpootlian then on cross did a good job saying, you knew him. He was acting upset, right? He wasn't acting like when you saw him at depositions or anything like that. They talked a little bit about forensic evidence. Was it preserved appropriately? Again, that's one of the common arguments of the defense, is that this evidence was not preserved appropriately. The crime scene was not preserved appropriately, and they did not investigate stuff they obviously should have investigated that could have pointed them to the real killer or killers. He's very tactful in how he always says killers or killer. He usually says killers first to plant that theory in the jury's head. 2 guns, this quickly, no trace of anyone, killers makes the most sense. That's what Harpootlian is doing. All right. Then we have the law enforcement officer, Jason something. I can't remember his name. He was, is he the last witness? Yeah, he's the last witness. He was the one that was sworn in as basically an expert on being a cop. He's a cop expert, general police procedure. And this is what Harpootlian needs to talk through this investigation and whether or not it was done appropriately. This guy seemed so honest. So honest. He didn't stretch. He knew his stuff. He knew when to say that's not my job, to where it didn't sound like a jerk. And when SLED came in and they were primary and we're secondary, we don't make the public statements. I thought he was incredibly honest. I think the prosecutor got some stuff, but not a lot of home runs out of him. Not a lot of home runs for the prosecutor today, in my opinion, but they're laying the foundation. I keep telling myself that. Just wait. They're laying the foundation. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes multiple witnesses to lay this foundation. They talked about how a storm was brewing 45 minutes out, and that's about when it came. They put a sheet over the victim, which he said, the victims, I don't like. I prefer my guys not do this because it can affect the evidence. And when they took the sheet off, they took it off in a certain way. It didn't drag it across the body so that blood ended up all over, the knees or all over the back where there was no blood on the back to begin with. And he's 100% right, which is how which is how you can tell he knows his stuff. He was very careful around the crime scene himself, but everybody else wasn't necessarily. He describes the bodies in detail, how AM appeared upset. He checked to see if they had so here we go. Here was a couple of the ways where I was like, wow, this guy's really honest. He checked to see, Alex Murdaugh checked to see if they had a pulse, which is totally reasonable and anybody would do, this law enforcement officer said. He went to get his shotgun because he didn't feel safe and he didn't know if the killer was still around, which is totally reasonable, this guy said. When you can give a little, especially if it's common sense, that makes me believe you. What do you guys think? Potential jurors out there, do you agree? If somebody's willing to give a little, that was one of the big things with Johnny Depp. He was willing to admit a lot of shortcomings of his own, and other witnesses and parties, not necessarily. So the prosecutor asked multiple times about whether or not there would be blood on Murdaugh's person for checking their pulse. And I thought it was a really good line of questioning and really smart to say, was he too clean? Was this too good? But there was a really decent back and forth about objections. And the prosecutor was trying to lay the foundation. And then he basically, because Harpootlian was really successful in his objections and thanked the judge over and over again, the prosecutor had to pivot and basically ask, if you would have touched him, do you think you would have had blood on your hands? And a lot of this was speculation and stuff, but the judge let him answer that question. And he said, yes, I do think I would have had blood on me, on my hands or somewhere if I would have reached over to touch his neck or his wrist, which his wrist was under his body, so it probably would have had to be his neck. So the prosecutors were trying to, they hammered home, and again, I'm not going to call anybody a liar, obviously, but the turn of phrase, don't make a liar out of yourself or don't make a liar out of me. The prosecutor said, oh, it was so strange. You're going to hear how weird it was and how strange it was and how he wasn't acting how you'd expect somebody to act. All the officers so far said Murdaugh was acting the way they would expect, especially this guy. And it seemed like the prosecutor really wanted to get this guy to say he was acting weird, or he was acting not like I would expect somebody to act. And the only thing they got out of him, which I think got lost in this long direct examination, was the only thing that was odd is he wanted to hang up with 911 and call family. Is that odd? I mean, the Idaho case, they called family and friends way before they called 911. In Sarah Boone's case, she called her ex-husband, who's kind of like family to her still, before she called 911. Is it that odd to want to call family in a tragic situation like this? I don't think it is, personally. Again, we can see. And then also, the prosecutors were arguing this was so close. We talked about it last night, how I said I text my wife when she's in another room. But the prosecutor during opening is like, it's so close. He should have just walked over there and told him. He should have just driven by there on his way out. Why didn't he just walk over? It's so close. Why would he call? Why would he text? But then the officer said there was a pretty substantial distance from the residence to the kennel. The trees in the way, you couldn't necessarily see it from the house. I thought that wasn't great for the prosecutor's opening. And then we got into the track marks again and the footprints. The track marks and the footprints. And I'll tell you, I don't really know what Harpootlian's doing with them yet, but he's focusing on them. He's getting me to notice them. Are you noticing them? Have you noticed the track marks and the footprints? Let me know in the comments by saying track marks and footprints if you've noticed them as well. But I will tell you, my ears are listening because I don't hear the state or the prosecutor using the track marks and the footprint to try to prove their case. They're not using the track marks saying that's Alec Murdaugh's, or this footprint's Alec Murdaugh, so it must be him. So if they're not using that evidence, my guess is the defense is going to use the evidence to say it points a different direction. The demeanor changed a little bit with how he was watching him out of the corner of their eye. It was interesting that it seemed like to catch Alec Murdaugh off guard that Paul's car wasn't there. His F-250 wasn't there, and that was kind of surprising. And then in cross-examination, back to the blood on his person. I think that's going to be really important, and more on that later. No real confirmation. Did he have blood on him or not? Basically, he was wearing such a white shirt that I think everybody noticed there was no blood on the white shirt. Not necessarily on his shorts, not necessarily on his hands. So far, I'm not real clear on that. They matched the tire tracks for some, but there was at least one set of tire tracks that they couldn't match. They matched some to, I think, somebody that was coming to fix the dogs, but there was a lot of talk about tire tracks. And to me, again, they're creating some things. I want to know answers to this. I want to know answers. They're developing these theories. He was not made aware of any other tire marks that the chief of the fire department or the chief of police, there was some confusion there, saw somewhere else. So are they not doing their due diligence, taking pictures and preserving things that could potentially be evidence? I wonder how many tire tracks were all over the property when it's like a farm that has its own truck and a bunch of people driving in and out of there, big family in town. A lot of talk about potential evidence they did not gather. He did get this, expert law enforcement procedure guy to say multiple times, that's not the way I would have done it. I wouldn't have been happy if my guys did it that way. But I don't think it ruined the investigation or compromised the investigation or anything like that. Okay. So let's get to one of the most important parts, and some of you have already been asking questions about it. Actually, let's get through some questions here before we do that. Jackie, if only dogs could talk, they could be the best witnesses. Jai Scott, thank you for noting the differences in this case and many others. California would never let it go down like this. Plus, want to say hello. Well, thank you for saying hello. Lisa Marie, love your channel, Peter. Finally caught alive, watching from Australia. Awesome. Sue, where are the 12 gauge shotgun cases? I'm not sure they have the actual shotgun in court. There's nothing a prosecutor likes more than having a gun in court to show the jury. It's like, but we know that's not the murder weapon, right? And that they're giving the defense a chance. I would run a truck through that. I would be like, they brought this shotgun to court where Murdaugh admitted it's his shotgun. He brought it out. This is not the murder weapon. In fact, he could not have shot the 16 gauge that he put in here. Falvo, he had a ton of enemies, so I don't think retaliation is that far-fetched of a theory here. I agree. Now, they're pointing to Paul's. They're not necessarily pointing to Alex's enemies, but you better believe if the state is able to get into that motive evidence about the financial crimes and all the other stuff he's accused of, the defense will pivot and will also talk about potential revenge and retaliation from there. John O'Reilly, looks like Murdaugh is sitting away from the jury. Unusual. You mean leaning away from them? Because the defense table usually is further away than the government's table. That dog mom, the very beginning of court is where the judge discusses the email. Can it cause a jury issue? So I saw somebody else comment that the email was a witness. Here we go. A witness from Chris Wilson, an associate of Alec Murdaugh, and a witness in the trial sent the email to the judge yesterday saying that the jurors' names had been revealed. We'll see how the judge handles it. He can put a gag order. He can still try to stop certain things. He can reprimand the media. He can get rid of cameras and microphones if he really thinks that in the interest of justice he needs to. Leona Edie, can the judge object to questions if the lawyers don't? I've seen it happen sometimes where a judge will say that's leading or something like that, but usually they don't. Usually they like to stay out of it. What is the conflict the sheriff spoke of? Karate Cat Mom, I'm not sure what conflict he mentioned. Sarah Vogelsong, the judge opened and put on the record he got an email from a witness in this case saying that his order was violated and jurors' identities were released. So if the judge finds out who violated the order, they could easily be reprimanded. Gamer Ducko, email from someone with a name on the witness list said jurors' identities have been compromised. Interesting. Lit Real Red, farm truck is a truck used hauling feeds and other. You can drive anywhere. Then why would you need to designate it as a farm truck if you could drive it anywhere? It just seems interesting to me. Courtney, problem with the hey, how you doing is the tone shift. Distraught to normal tone for hey, then back to distraught. It's like when he stopped to say hey, he dropped the act. And I think if people could read it that way, and let me know if you agree with Courtney Michelle here. Don, Peter, if high-profile cases affects your firm losing clients, do you drop the case or do you have a meeting with the partners to figure out a way ahead? I have a YouTube channel, and a lot of you guys are very nice, and I think you enjoy the YouTube channel. And a lot of you put on here that you hate lawyers, you hate defense lawyers, you hate ambulance chasers, as PI lawyers are called sometimes. So I think there's always going to be people that disagree with what we do, especially my intro is, or used to be, everybody hates lawyers until they need one. So if we believe in the case and we believe in the client, we'll keep it. And, we'll deal with the fallout. Jessica, Peter, you make these trials palatable as a lay or for a layperson. Dare I say you make law fun? Gracias. Listen, I think it's enjoyable and educational too to talk about this stuff with you. I always give the disclaimer when we say it's fun or this video is fun because the content sucks and is so sad. And we live in a broken world and we deal with some of the darkest things that happen. But the conversation is educational and it is enjoyable. So I'm with you there. Ashley Maston, even if they believed his story about family being targeted, it wouldn't pose a danger to the general public. Great point. So if you represent Alec Murdaugh, would you be like, so you believed him? It was somebody else targeting them. So the general public is fine. It's just them. EJ, 9:38 a.m. EST, Judge Newman stated he received an email at 5:30 p.m. from a Chris Wilson regarding a violation of his protective order. It's so sad when it's the worst when that happens. Cynthia, I think the prosecution has a lot to prove. Between the defense's opening statement and some mistakes brought to light today, kind of has me leaning towards not guilty. I know it's still early in the trial. Anna Marie, the judge was sent an email by a witness that states the jurors' names were published. Both sides did not seem to care and did not object. If they didn't think it's going to affect the case, then they wouldn't. Jesse Sue, I can't tell if he's emotional at times or if he has some kind of disability. You can notice it's more prominent during certain times. Thoughts. Some people, when they get adrenaline or they get super crazy, their voice cracks, or, you know, they have different speech patterns and stuff. Like, it's actually not that unusual in seeing in other cases. Tay Pasternak, you forgot to mention that the defense attorney also stand right in front of the witnesses. Is that also a tactic? Yes, but that depends on the courtroom. Sometimes you're allowed to. Some defense attorneys like to show aggression that way. They'll get right up on it. Some defense attorneys think it's better to be over there, so the jury has to look there and then look at the witness and look at the attorney. Some attorneys want to be right in the line of sight at the same time, so they're putting on the show. That seems to be what kind of attorney Harpootlian is. What happened to the chicken, Ashley? I don't know. Did it try to cross the road? Bam Askin, what's up with the flat tires surrounding AM? What's up with all the flat tires surrounding AM? I'm not following that. Cynthia Snodgrass, I think AM hired someone to murder them. Was the man who AM paid to shoot him looked into for these murders? I'm sure he was. I am sure it was looked into. Just curious what his alibi was for that. So here's what I would tell you, though. And it's the same thing with the whole Paul shot Maggie first and then shot himself. Law enforcement did an investigation. The prosecutors charged a certain crime, and they charged Alec Murdaugh doing this himself, first-degree intentional homicide. They did not charge him with conspiracy or hiring a hitman or anything like that. Sarah Bellum. So AM is being accused of actually doing this, not hiring a hitman. Yes. So if the prosecution can't prove it, then he walks. Thanks again, Peter. Correct. They can't take a alternate theory, like maybe it was somebody else, but maybe he, directed them to do this. They haven't argued that. And that's not in the charging document, so the defense wouldn't know that they have to defend against that if that was going to be their plan. Can't be a trial by ambush. Ann Liebman, when you are involved with a crazy family, please get cameras all over, inside and outside. It's good advice. Stacy, I'm not feeling comfortable with this yet. I'm on the defense's side. Again, you should be on the defense's side until the prosecution pulls you to their side beyond a reasonable doubt. And please, it's day one of testimony. Let's wait till we hear more. They're laying a foundation. Mandy Bishop, why is the people in the audience prevented from seeing pictures and videos? They're so gruesome. They are not necessarily meant for the public. They don't want to inflame the passion of the people watching to affect the jury. If everybody starts crying or throwing up or have to walk out, they don't want the jury to get some indication of that. So they're just trying to be careful. Lucia, do you think AM should testify? No. I think that right now their cases, they don't have enough. They screwed up the investigation. They can't prove this case. So if you have that kind of case, a lot of times you don't want them to testify. Amanda Carricker Moore, did I miss something about them having a terribly tumultuous marriage? Amanda, you've probably been in this chat or others where people have talked about, she met with a divorce lawyer or whatever. I have not heard the prosecutor argue that. I have heard the defense argue everything was fine. This family was happy. So I think that's kind of outside conjecture at this point, not something that's come in court. Seems like there's a motive on AM's side. What did he gain from his wife's death? We've got to hear that. And they think the prosecutors think it's because he wanted to cover up these financial crimes, but we'll hear if that actually comes in front of the jury. Court K, I think his "how are you" was more of a habit, Southern hospitality thing. Love your channel. Thank you, Court K. And I agree. I have the same habit. I do the same thing. Crystal Fuller, what is on your shirt? It's actually Biggie Smalls. My guy, Biggie. Sorry, motive is missing for AM, Amanda said. Yeah. Texas Spitfire, if AM felt he needed a gun for safety, why invite the relatives over? Well, once law enforcement's there, you probably start to feel safer. I don't know. Listen, would you be rational, you think, after finding this out? Because I don't think I would. All right. Let's get to the end of this video, which I think is like the best part of the whole day was the last, 10 minutes. 8:58 here. So let's watch this. Some more good lawyering, some more tactics. And we will discuss it together, and I'll put some more super chats and new members on the screen as we listen as well. By the way, if you haven't subscribed yet, there's over 5,000 people. I think this is the biggest chat we've had during the Murdaugh trial. So if you're new here for Murdaugh, let me know by putting Murdaugh in the chat or in the comments, and hit that subscribe button and like the video if you haven't already. Let's get to 5,000 likes before this video ends.
The house, all of it,
It was obtained for the entire 1,700 acre property,
including the house.
including the house.
And was that executed?
So they're talking about a search warrant here, just to give a little background. And they're talking about what was the search warrant for and was it executed? I mean, did you actually search the house?
It was executed beginning at the dog kennels at the primary scene.
But did you go to the house?
I did not.
Did your department?
We did not.
Who actually executed the search warrant?
The search warrant was provided that evening to crime scene, which is standard protocol. When they come, they're going to ask for it. We have to show it. Sledge crime scene.
Okay.
It was given to them. And we stayed, myself and several of my detectives. Several were sent home so they could come in the next morning. And we stayed and assisted. I didn't leave till 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning.
Did you go in the residence?
But no, sir. The drone footage that you
So this is interesting to me, right? And a lot of you pointed this out. They have a search warrant for everywhere on the 1,700 acres, multiple structures, the primary residence. Did you go in there? Why didn't you go in there? Did you do testing?
saw was the last thing I did at that scene that morning, and then I left and went home.
What about that night? When was the search warrant executed that night?
After that incident there, or that search warrant was executed, I did come back later that day and did a walk around of the property that we've been discussing all afternoon.
Right.
I have never been to the main house.
Never been in.
I have not been in the main house.
I mean, think about that. You never even went and checked the main house. The guy's got no blood on him. You said you noticed that. And you never went and checked the main house. This is a major issue for me. Let me know if it is for you as well, because if the state, and I keep saying the state, I know it's the Attorney General's office, if the prosecutor is going to use the argument that he didn't have blood on him because he cleaned up, he changed his clothes, he got rid of his clothes, whatever, wouldn't you want to go and check the house? Wouldn't you want to check the shower, check the sink? They put the time of death pretty close to when Alec Murdaugh called them. So could he have perfectly cleaned up from this? Ditched the gun somewhere? We didn't look in the house for that? Maybe somebody else did, but I mean, this guy didn't. And I'm interested to see what they did when searching the residence. And maybe somebody else did, but he's making a doubter out of me right now.
Not during this incident or any other incident.
Did someone from your department go in the main house?
Not that I'm aware of. It wouldn't have been, not as an investigator. Let's put that. None of my detectives went over there under my direction.
So you gave the search warrant to SWAT, to crime scene people.
Yes, sir.
That gave them the authority to go in the house, correct?
It was signed off on to cover the 1,700 acres.
Right.
So listen, Harpoolian's setting this up. He better have the goods because he's like, so SLED had it. So they could have gone in the house, right? They had authority to go in the house, right? He's setting it up. And sometimes if he knows that some SLED guy or gal is going to say, no, we couldn't go in the house, he's laying the foundation right now with the Mr. Police expert that you had the warrant, you gave it to SLED, SLED had authority to go in the house, and they could have searched the house too, right? I don't know what the answer is going to be. I just know where Harpoolian's going with this questioning.
I'm specifically talking about the residence.
Any structure.
They could have gone in the residence. They could have taken all his clothes to check if they wanted, right?
They could have. I don't know.
You see how he's talking about SLED. So I see this comment here. He says he lets SLED execute the warrant. Okay. Are we sure they did? And did they search everywhere? Did they search for the clothes and for the gun? Did they search the sink and the pipes and the shower and all that stuff? I think that's where he's going. I could be wrong. Maybe SLED did all of this and maybe they found something, but it seems like Harpoolian knows something.
They didn't.
Well, we're going to talk about that later on. They could have. You're familiar with trace evidence. Many cases where they check showers or sinks to see if there's a trace evidence of blood, right?
Am I? Yes, sir.
Yes. And do you know whether they did that or not?
I do not. Again.
Do you know that you can, with the appropriate technology, use, look at microscopic evidence, see whether it be blood or tissue, or if somebody tried to wash something, you can actually still, in a washed piece of clothing, detect blood or detect tissue, even after it's been washed. You aware of that?
Am I aware of that? Yes, I am.
You know
So
what?
this is called making their expert yours. So a lot of you have pointed out this wasn't his job. He passed it off to SLED. Well, guess what? He is still a police procedure expert. So you can ask him questions like this. You're aware you can do this testing, right? You're aware you can do that. You're aware you can see if this happened. And he's not saying it didn't happen in this case because it's not my job, pass it off. But you're aware you can do it. So if any other officer says you can't, he's going to point back to their police expert that said you could.
Whether SLED did that.
I do not, again.
But they could have that night done all of those things under that search warrant.
Presumably so, and I'm not saying they didn't. Again, Mr.
Well, but they could have. I'm not saying they didn't either. We're going to find out.
Sure.
But under the search warrant, your department.
I mean, he's got to have the goods, right? He's so confident. He's like, I'm not saying they didn't either. We're going to find out. But they could have.
Obtained. He had the authority to go in the house, any of the buildings, anywhere on that property, and look for guns, evidence of any sort of crime, evidence of, again, in the shower, in the sinks, trace evidence. They had the authority to do that.
To answer your question, as long as they stayed within the scope of the actual warrant that was signed, I don't have that search warrant, and Detective Rutland is the one that actually got it. If they stay within the scope of that search warrant, and they're only searching inside that scope, they had the ability to search structures, vehicles, only 1,700 acres, as long as they're
Well, I
within the
believe
scope.
we'll hear from Detective Rutland tomorrow,
Yes, sir.
and I'll ask her these questions.
Thank you, sir.
Having said that, Your Honor, I have no further questions.
I mean, he's smooth. He just is smooth to me. Shuffling of papers or looking for stuff or a technological error, that doesn't really bother me. I mean, I think he's smooth, personally. Azam, thanks for joining as long as you did. Sleep well.
You redirect.
He's setting up the camera again.
That you notice, I know we've been through quite a bit of it, but council raised this issue. The path you followed, were they consistent with someone who, with the person who started back beyond this area? And then where did they go from there?
Again, some clunky stuff here. I wasn't really following a lot what the prosecutor was doing with the footprints or the track marks, but he tries to get into it a little bit here.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
I'm asking,
And here comes some good objections and some good fights now. Objection leading. They objected way more to leading throughout the day than they did in the beginning. They let a lot slide.
and where they went. Where did they originate? Where did they go to? And where did they end?
That's not.
Objection is sustained as to the form of the question.
Thank you. If you could,
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's remember that every time we hear it. We're only listening to bits and pieces of this. He did it a lot today.
please explain to us where in your estimation, having traced the tracks, where they originated from, where they ultimately went to, and where they ended up.
The shoe impressions crossed completely from one side all the way to the other, with the building to the right, going down, coming back the opposite direction. The only reason I can say that we're fairly certain that it started from the grass side and went through, turned around and came back is because we never saw any impressions similar to that running beyond the airport hangar on the back side.
In the location where, in reference to where these footprints ended, ultimately, and where Maggie's body is located. how did that line up? Describe that how they lined up.
If you take a step back from there, to the right of that image would have been, on the opposite side of the hangar door, would have been Maggie's body.
Referencing State's Exhibit 190. Captain Chapman, do you notice blood marks here in the water?
Objection.
All right, so now the fight begins. We've heard a lot about water. The only real reference that I heard to this point was that it wasn't from rain and that it looked like it could have been somebody washing out the kennels. I guess the dogs make a mess or eat or whatever it may be. That's the only reference I really heard to the water, so I didn't know what was going on. But now tell me where you think the prosecution is going with this question of blood in the water that they actually don't get to because of this fight. And it's a good fight. Let's listen to it.
Your Honor.
The objection is sustained.
Thank you.
Did you observe blood marks in the water when you were there that evening?
Calling for speculation.
Right.
He is calling for speculation as to what discoloration in the water, if there is any, is caused by.
I will say he tries to object appropriately without speaking objections, but sometimes the judge will ask for some explanation, and he could have said, you don't know, he doesn't know what's in that water, he's speculating. Instead, he said speculation as to what the discoloration is, if there is any, which I thought was a very respectful and appropriate objection. So I do want to point that out.
I'll lay more of a foundation, Your Honor. Captain Chapman, were you familiar with the scene as this picture depicts?
Yes, sir.
Did you personally view what this picture depicts?
I did.
Are you familiar with the discoloration, and did you observe the discoloration in this photograph on two different areas?
I did see that.
Was that discoloration, in your opinion, consistent?
Objection. He's not been qualified to give an opinion about this matter.
He's trying different things now, right? Speculating, not qualified to give this opinion. He does not want, and here's what you may think. He's like, this is already happening in front of the jury. What's the big deal? Why have this? He doesn't want them to be able to argue it later in closing. If nobody testifies that there was blood in that water, then the prosecution cannot make an argument that there was blood in that water. Why do you think they would want to argue there was blood in that water? I don't know. But maybe it was part of the cleanup. Did somebody get a hose and wash down the bodies or wash down themselves to get blood off themselves so that blood got in the water? I don't know. But the prosecution at this point can't argue it because nobody has testified that there was blood in that water, which is why the prosecution is trying to get it out of this witness.
I didn't hear the complete question.
In your estimation, and
Your Honor, objection, and if he's going to pursue this frivolous line of questioning, I'd ask the jury be excused.
So now he's arguing in front of the jury. If he's going to argue this frivolous line of questioning, I ask the jury be excused because I want the jury to know that this is a frivolous line of questioning. I don't want the jury to hold this as having any water at all to it or any substantiation. And if he does, I need to voir dire this witness to see if he's an expert that can even testify as to what blood looks like in water. Like that to me is not an expert opinion. I can figure out if that looks like blood in the water. I can't tell you for sure it was blood, but I can say it looked like it was blood. Kind of like saying that guy looked like he was driving 50 miles an hour. It's an estimation. I'm not scientifically testing it, but based on my life, I know what blood looks like when it hits water. But man, he does not want them to be able to say that.
No evidence whatsoever.
Objection is overruled. Let's pose the question.
in your experience and observation.
Overruled. This judge is also not fazed. This judge is like, sit down, Dick. Just sit down over there, please.
Having observed the scene and all the matter that was there, were those lines in the water consistent with blood?
Objection.
Objection sustained.
Thank you.
But now he comes around. Ah, shoot, I blew it. I'm going to back it up a little. Now he comes around and does sustain it.
Objection.
Objection sustained.
Thank you.
I don't need to be thanked for any ruling.
I don't need to be thanked for any ruling. I love it. This judge is awesome. I don't need to be thanked for any ruling. Thank you. And now Harpoolian is like, oh, shoot, I guess I took it a little too far, and he does apologize, but.
No, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Expressing my gratitude is improper. I appreciate that.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Your Honor. And I'll ask just one last question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Expressing my gratitude is improper. I appreciate that. Hey, man, that's a guy eating some humble pie. He's like, you called me on it, Your Honor, and you're right. I know some lawyers that would fight with the judge about that or not say anything at all, so I give him credit for that. Give credit where credit's due. And then immediately the prosecutor thanks the judge for saying that to Harpoolian, which is just hilarious. Listen, sometimes we don't do it on purpose. Sometimes when we win something or the judge does what we want him to do, we say thank you. When somebody gives you something you want, you say thank you. That's the polite thing to do. So sometimes that's how it just comes out. There was some laughter in the entire room, which I thought was pretty funny as well. But I also want you to notice how Harpoolian is standing up, staring at the prosecutor, walking towards him, standing there during this line of questions. So the jury sees that he's standing. He's being aggressive. I would ask for him to sit down. If I was a prosecutor, I'd be like, Judge, if he's done objecting, can he sit down? He doesn't need to walk over towards me. Now, I think he might be viewing something on the TV, so maybe that's not fair, but it feels like he's really trying to assert dominance here. But he could be looking at something on the Elmo there or on the TV, so I could be reading into it a little bit. But I felt his presence, and I thought he did a really good job. I do some of this, not quite to this level, but some of this when you feel like stuff's getting a little gray in an area that you don't think it should be going. Sometimes you have to be a little more aggressive to let the judge know, no, you're about to make a big mistake, Judge, if you let this in. So sometimes you have to do that with more than just your words and sometimes with your mannerisms.
Question on and I understand the court's ruling. Captain Chapman, are the substance there that you identified as having observed, are they in a straight line? Are they in straight lines?
Yes.
So it's like, forget about what they are if they're blood. Are they in straight lines? Yes. Like, how does that help you if they're in straight lines? But again, a seasoned lawyer, Dick Harpoolian, is about to make a very good legal move here.
Thank the court's
I'd like to
indulgence.
make a motion to strike his questions about blood from the record and the jury be instructed to disregard those questions.
I've informed the jury that they're to disregard any question when I sustain the objection. They were previously instructed on that.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Yes.
Oh gosh. Okay, hold on. We're gonna have to listen to that again. Okay, but first off, he's like, I want to strike all that from the jury, and he's right. That's a smart thing to do. And the judge is like, listen, dude, I already told him if an objection is sustained, they disregard that. So please, we know you won that little battle. We don't need to rehash it. It's like my dad when he hits a good golf shot. He's like, and I'm like, oh, good shot. He's like, was that a good shot? It's like, yes, Dad, I just said it was a good shot. It's like Dick Harpoolian. It's like he just won this battle. He won this objection. He didn't get to ask the question. He kept it out of the jury's ears, or out of the jury's consideration, I should say. And then he's like, and I want to strike it. The judge is like, it's already struck because you won the objections. I don't have to say good job again. But then, as if they will forget it, I agree with you, listen to learn. I agree with you, can't unring the bell. But the best part of all of this, if we want a good laugh here, we're almost at the end of the video. I've been over an hour. It's 10 o'clock at night. He almost says thank you again to the judge and then kind of catches himself, which literally made me laugh out loud.
On that.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Yes.
Did you hear it? He puts his, he's like, yeah, thank.
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Yes. Yes.
Listen, I know some of you guys don't like this lawyer. I think he's a stud, but that was kind of a funny thing. I think he's doing a good job personally so far. John, if you can put up the poll as to who won the day, the prosecution or the defense, let me know. Hopper, listen, I just want to give him benefit of the doubt. All right. I looked like that to me too, which is what you're seeing, but we'll put up that poll. I think who won the day, prosecution or defense, as I go through some more questions. Cobalt Ann. Could AM have driven Maggie and Paul to the kennel? Sure, he could have, but we need some evidence of that. Zimena, if he is found not guilty, can they do another trial with other charges like conspiracy or something else, or is this it? Nope, this would be it. John O'Rourke. So can they or can they not bring up past crimes for AM? They are still trying to, because they mentioned, I wrote it down here somewhere. before they called the witness, before they called the 911 witness, they're like, Judge, we're not going to talk about the side of the road incident with a couple of these witnesses, which is where he faked his own death, murder, suicide thing for the insurance money. We're not going to ask these witnesses, but we are going to try to later, but we're going to have a whole motion hearing on it. So they are still going to try to, John, bring up some of it. I don't know how much they will be able to bring up. Ryan, the dopest Hawaiian shirt ever. Thank you, Ryan. Biggie, biggie, biggie. Can't you see is just stuck in my head now. It's always stuck in my head. Lita, why wasn't he hauled in for questioning like other people would have been when a crime has been committed? Maybe it was the people he knew. Maybe he asked for a lawyer. Maybe he invoked Fifth Amendment right. It looked like he was cooperating, so he didn't necessarily do that because he was talking to people. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe we'll find out. Mr. RN, no proper search. The guns can be hid in the trees. They could be. But if you have a search warrant for all 1,700 acres, that's the point. If the judge allows you to search 1,700 acres, that's broad. Multiple, I don't know if it was residences, but multiple structures and cars. You can search all that. You should. If 2 people have passed because of this, you want to get the right guy or gal. Sam Christensen, I'm learning the facts of this case just for the first time during this trial. So far, the prosecution is telling a compelling story, but the defense is asking significant, thought-provoking questions. I like that description. JLL, Tallahassee Hero is what I'll say. Tallahassee Hero is here again. Thanks for doing this again. Prez Huss, good to catch a live. This is not convincing, Prez Huss said. I think I know which way he's going to vote. Brenda Cucaro, watched most of the trial, and although AM is innocent at this point, other hand, I feel the state is in slow burn mode. The defendant hit on a few notes. Eric M. Junker, if in danger, why grab a 2 shotgun when he had another 30 round, 300 blackout? Big difference between 12 gauge and 16 gauge. You would fill them in your hand. Interesting. A lot of you know a lot more about all this stuff than I do with guns and ammo. Diane, in the police department, is the police department inept or incompetent, or did they throw the case because they are all terrified of AM? So Diane, I hate to say it, I don't know the answer to this, and it may be neither. But if you're on this jury, it seems like you think they're one or the other. Jenny P. I never make lives and get the opportunity to thank you, Peter. You're incredible. Love this channel. Love you, Jenny P. Glad you're here. Eric M. Junker. Jury thinking I've seen blood and water. Everyone has. I agree with you. But, I mean, listen, I don't think... We'll see if they try to do this with some other witnesses, but... I've seen blood and water. Have you seen blood and water outside in the mud at night? I mean, that would be tough to kind of know that it's blood. I don't know. Jen B, 2 questions. 1, why didn't the officers clear the house when they arrived? Thought it'd be protocol. Why was the F-250 found abandoned elsewhere? Jen B. Questions. These are questions that don't have answers that I've heard yet. Kate Carpenter, I have a few questions about the Fucci case regarding the jury. Hope you do one soon on Fucci. I love all your videos. Pete did one on Fucci, I think, last week, and he'll probably do another one next week. So we've got more coming on Fucci if anybody's here for that. Rob, my guy. I've got defense slightly ahead at this point, but it's the early rounds and much to come. Loved the end of the day snark. Also, present in the mail. I hope it is what I think it is. And I was going to mention it, but I didn't want to jinx it that you may have mentioned something that we have talked about in the past. And I mean, I'm hoping, Rob, that it ends up being my 200K deal that I can celebrate with. Maybe it'll be that, which would be so fun. So I'm looking forward to it. And I will dedicate some time to it when it gets here. All right. Okay, good. I think this feels right. Okay. So I have the poll. It is 70%. Which side do you think is winning? 70% the defense and 30% the prosecution, winning the day today. And Rob has the prosecution slightly ahead. And if the prosecution is ahead, if the defense is ahead at this point, it's clearly not guilty. And if the prosecution is barely ahead, it's still not guilty, as hard as that is to swallow. But we'll talk more reasonable doubt later. I appreciate a lot of awesome, super nice comments like Greg Hall Art. A lot of you just throwing some really nice comments in there. It makes it really fun and rewarding to do stuff like this when you guys are so nice about it. And obviously, I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to misstate certain things. I'm going to say something you don't agree with. I may say something that's insensitive inadvertently. So I appreciate being here, giving grace. I try to give grace when some people come at me. Sometimes that's cool. I try to respond with grace, like I said, and try to be nice in everything that I do and say, and cordial and respectful. That's how we like to keep it in the chat. I hope you'll all do the same. That's what my chat in this channel has been known for, is respect, disagreement, diversity of thought we like to bring in here. So Jackie, you send a member or you send a question just like you sent this one. So Azam, please do the unboxing from the gift from Rob. That's a good idea. So Jackie, I will say the chat is going kind of wild and there's a lot of people through the chat. So I don't see every question and I don't answer every question, but I always try to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Thank you so much, Diana. Seriously, Diana, thank you. No, seriously, thank you. I appreciate it. And P-Hop, thank you as well. And I think that's all we got tonight. We went overtime, over an hour. I try to keep these for an hour. Thank you, Marty. I try to keep these to an hour, but this was more like the structure, how the videos are going to go than some of the past videos. I don't play the entirety of things like I did the opening statements. I usually pull some clips. We describe some things and I recap them. Some of you have already watched it. Some of you don't want to watch it all day and you just want the recap. So I appreciate you coming. Please, 5,000 of you still in here, hit that like button on the way out so we can get it up there. If anybody wants to watch this recap, they'll see it. If you like it, share it with your friends and subscribe. Do all the YouTubey things. You guys are the best. Biggie and I will see you tomorrow.